like to call this July 9th, 2026 Board of Education work session to order. George, can you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Here.
Mr. Helms?
Here.
Mr. Miko?
Here.
Mr. Wall?
Here.
Mrs. Hausum?
Here.
All present.
Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda is our strategic priorities. Our district has developed and is currently engaged in a 3-year strategic plan which reflects the values, beliefs, and hopes of our students, staff, parents, and community. There are 4 strategic priorities to the plan: transforming teaching and learning, aligning staff and resources, cultivating culture and climate, and leveraging funding and facilities. Our strategic priorities give actual focus to our district's purpose and mission and guide the work of our strategic plan. Next, we do have an agenda change. The following changes were made to the agenda: addition of an action item under Section G, Superintendent's Report, Superintendent Item 2, Strongsville Chamber of Commerce Donation Agreement, and addition of an action item under Section K, Superintendent's Report, Human Resources, Item 1, Resignation Certificated. That brings us to public comment. We do have a few people in the audience that would like to make public comment, so we will start with Bonnie Tennis. Oh, I laid them down as they came in, Bonnie. Sorry.
Okay, Bonnie Tennis, 9407 Brushwood Lane. Well, I was listening to all those meetings. I always watch, I always read everything, all the reports. So the reports are great. Mr. Treasurer, congratulations. I've learned a lot from all the information that you provide. So you have the community leaders meeting, which included about 27 participants, and you provided the feedback from that meeting. So here's the short summary of the feedback from that meeting provided by you regarding the operational levy. Leaders of this community want 90-day cash reserves, operational levy 5 to 7 years with minimal cuts, combined issue on a ballot of November 2026. This Board of Education is making decisions based on that feedback. My first question is, why combined levy? Why not leave the renewal levy alone and go with the new continuous levy like it was before? And the reason is the rollbacks. Now, I don't know if anyone mentioned at that leadership meeting about the rollbacks. On July 9 of 2024, Board of Education meeting, when decision was going to be made about to which renewable levy the 2022 or 2019 convert into continuing levy, was a concern about the rollbacks. Why not this year? Nowhere in any of these new scenarios the loss of the rollbacks is mentioned. Here's the explanation made by Mr. Treasurer on July 9 of 2024 in regard to which levy should be converted into continuous. So with the other levy, that's quote, but they're in between, with the other renewal levy that we have, it was originally half passed in 2000s. There was a homestead and rollback credit for the homeowners. It's about 12% reduction of the tax bill. That was phased out on any new levies. So this levy passed in 2019 doesn't have those credits that the other levy has. So if we would change that levy to a new levy, it would lose those homestead and rollback credits to the homeowners. So by keeping that other levy as a renewal levy, it still has those credits to taxpayers. The state gives it to us back in a state reimbursement. This one should be left to the voters to decide. I'm talking about renewal levy. If one day this renewal levy does not pass, then yes, it should be converted. But at this point, it's a big loss to all Strongsville homeowners. We hear a lot from this Board of Education administration and others about state not fully funding public schools, but at the same time, you are willing to shift the cost from the state to residents. Let the state pick it up for as long as it's possible. If you convert this renewal levy, then this rollback reimbursement that benefits Strongsville residents will be given to other schools, possibly private schools, in the form of school vouchers, which you are against. Based on this year's February forecast, the rollbacks, homestead, and TPP reimbursement a year for this renewal levy is over $800,000. I don't know how much is the rollback without the TPP, but let's assume that it's $600,000. That's $3 million every 5 years. That money will have to come from somewhere, and it will come from the taxpayers if this renewal levy is allowed to lapse or is combined with the new levy. Need to do a renewal levy and larger continuous levy with cuts, and 6 mil new levy will not do it. I mean, I'm talking about the scenarios. It has to be more than 6 mil. And another thing I would like to mention is the 070 fund. Transferring $15 million back to general fund does not solve a deficit spending problem. It does help the 90-day cash on hand for the next 4 fiscal years, but that's about it. And it only puts this district in a positive for 1 year, the 2027, and in 2030, based on the scenario spreadsheet with $8 million cuts, puts this district 1 year in a positive, and in 2030 puts, deficit spending would be $8.7 million. And if you would add a column for the 5th year, 2031, the deficit spending for 2021 would be over $11 million. That's higher than this year, and cash balance in 2031 would be around $12.9 million. How do you fix that in 2031? So that's not a very good idea. Money in 07 funds supposed to offset the cost of new elementary schools, and it should stay there. As long as those funds are used for what they were intended for, there should be no problem. But $3.2 million was approved for baseball, softball field. To me, and I believe many other residents, a roof over my head is more important than a swimming pool, but it looks like for this Board of Education, these things are equally important. So when we're looking at fund policy, it says that it should not be used for the sports facilities and should be only used for the schools. And that's what was the intended. So based on this policy, Board of Education decision should be simple no. When this was, you were voting on it and you approved it. But here's what your decision was based on. Here are the different perspectives and decisions that Board of Education has on something that should be very simple. No, can't do it, not yet, and not with 070 money. Board member 1 says, I have not changed my stance. I would like to move forward with it and go out to bid. I feel like we are touching a lot of kids' lives by doing this. It's a positive for our community, and I think we need to win. Number 2, I don't want to be the red tape that causes a running play when you want to score a touchdown. So with that, I vote yes to that. Number 3, and so not every vote we get to make up here kind of touches on values, but this one does. And for me, it's important and trusted by the community to renew our obligations and to keep that vision of what makes a Mustang a Mustang. So for me, that will be 100% yes. Number 4, anytime we have feedback, especially in large quantities, I think it's our duty to take that seriously. And so my perspective today is I want to take time to digest it, and I want to make sure that we consider all angles. Number 5, but for me, again, it's not a matter of it. It's a matter of when, and it's a matter of the proper order. And it's a $3.5 million ask. But when you look at the holistically with all the other expenses, my vote is to hold off. This district has children in trailers already 3 years, and many more to come. Looks like another 4 or 5 years. And this administration, the Board of Education, chose to approve funding for baseball, softball field instead of fixing Zeller's building, which is supposed to be used for the overflow. If fixed 3 years ago, the cost would be a lot less than $4 million, minus the mobile units, rental, and installation would be the right thing to do. And that's what 070 fund is for. And it should be used for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Jason Heckman?
Hey guys, appreciate you taking the time to listen to me.
Jason, if you don't mind, I'm sorry, you haven't done public comment before.
I have
Could you
not.
State your name and your address.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so Jason Heckman, address 20788 North Greystone Drive. So yeah, I'm here to talk about the potential of changing property tax for levies to move to income tax. So I do appreciate you listening to me, and as you stated, I don't typically give public comment. I kind of just sit in the background, and I vote for every levy you guys have asked for. I'm a big supporter of the schools. I've never turned down a levy since I've moved to Strongsville. But I felt like, I've heard there's a potential to be asked for you guys to switch from property tax to income tax. I can't support that, and I want to tell you why. There's really 3 points I want to bring up. First point is Strongsville is a very large commercial hub. It's mostly retail and service industry. We're not a technology hub. We're not a manufacturing hub. We're retail and service. If you take away property tax and replace it with income tax, all of those businesses are now off the hook of paying for the community they directly benefit from. They benefit from the money that's spent in their stores. They benefit from their restaurants. They no longer have to pay to enjoy that benefit. The non-resident land leaseholders, the landlords of those buildings, they will no longer pay into the community. They'll take the income, but they'll no longer pay to the community to be in here. So that's my first point, why this is, I don't think it's fair. The math doesn't really add up. So if you look at what we're looking for, there's a renewal level of about 3.37 is the renewal levy, and my understanding is you guys are looking for about 3.63 to bring it up to about 7 mils, right around there. That's all rough estimate. The other piece I understand is that the income we're asked for is 0.875. So there's 2 ways you can do income tax for, and I'm sure you guys know this, income tax for schools. There's traditional income or earned. My guess would be earned, which is just wage taxes. That capital gains, investments, pensions, all those are off the table. So the only people paying the tax are wage earners. So considering the median value of homes in Strongsville is right around $298,000, all based off a census. Median income is $103,000. A break-even point for people is right around, 3.57. So it's basically 3.6 to 1. If your ratio from your income to your house, you're only going to pay more. You're paying more if you're anything below that. The average ratio right now of income in here, the ratio is right around 2.9. So most workers in the city with homeowners will end up paying more under this process. So you're not really giving homeowner relief. They're actually going to pay more under this process. People that, we talk about senior relief, and senior relief is a very admirable thing to look for. But actually the seniors who need the relief more, the ones who collect Social Security but have to work to supplement their income, they're going to have to pay. They probably don't pay now, they probably rent. So now somebody who needs the help the most is now going to have to pay for the school district itself. On top of that, all the students that work part-time jobs, you're not asking the students to fund their own education. It's really kind of ridiculous from that perspective. So finally, my last point is it breaks the social compact. Taking away property tax, I know that the state has been told that it's against, the state constitution of Ohio. We all know that. They need to fix it. This is not the way to fix it. People that have paid into the system and now don't want to pay anymore because they're done, they've paid off their houses. That's not how this works. That's not how the social compact works. I've been paying my entire life into this, well, not my entire life, but since I've been an adult and owned a home, I'm happy to do it. I voted when I didn't have kids. I voted when I did have kids. Schools need funding. The school funding is what makes our community strong. It's what makes our property value strong. You change it, it all goes away. That's it. Thank you for listening to me. Appreciate it.
Next, Maggie Koza. Maggie, if you could state your name and address, thank you.
Maggie Koza, 9812 Hazelwood Avenue. I'm also here to talk a little bit more about the income tax versus property tax stuff. A couple things that I need to address and make a little clear as far as agreeing on certain things. I'm in agreement with certain other community members on how the board gets their messaging out. I mean, like we've said it, we're all collectively in agreement that the messaging is poor. It's poor, guys. But one thing that we were not in agreement on is going forward as far as what you're going to put on the ballot, where the money is going to come from. property taxes pay for so much more than just schools. It pays for EMS, libraries, infrastructure, the roads we drive on. I pay into things that I don't use to. I try to look at things as, because I always have food on the mind, I like to look at it as a potluck, okay? What do we do at a potluck? We all bring a dish. We all don't have to eat from the same dish. That's the point of it. You can't come to the potluck without a dish. You can't divulge in things if you don't bring a dish. That's how I grew up learning, that you put in what you do and you do the work and you contribute to society. That's what I grew up on. The other issue with doing income taxes, as Jason did point out, is it's hitting earned income and it's going to kill our renters. And I've said this over and over again, and if I was able to get more of a word in the other night at the leadership meeting, which I'm sorry, that was overrun by the same group of people, and it was hard for us to get the right things said. I didn't actually find it too much productive. What I learned is that we're still listening to somebody who can't seem to pay his taxes either. And I'm going to say something that I don't think any of you have ever had the guts to say. On April 30th, a Cleveland.com article dropped. And in it, it described over 3,000 people that have property tax liens. And it was really interesting that you can scroll down and you just hit the city and you can see everybody in here that's got money owed on their liens. One in particular, at 18079 Brick Mill Run. $5,914 is the delinquent amount. It's public record. This isn't a witch hunt. You can look it up. They put it out there for a reason. But you can see other people in our community also on that list. So my advice is I wouldn't be listening to tax advice from somebody who can't pay his bills and who continues to put a political agenda ahead and his own personal interests to escape accountability, once again. So, like I said, I agree that our board doesn't do well at giving us the information that we need to help them pass certain things and to have good conversations and to really listen to people. That I agreed on. But I certainly did not agree that income tax is going to be what fixes this problem. It's so much more than that. Thank you.
Last but not least, Ms. Kelly Kosick.
Good evening, school board members and members of the school administration. My name is Kelly Kosick, and I live at 12542 Cooper's Run. As a parent of Strongsville High School student and a Soror Elementary School student, I'm here tonight to talk about the possibility of an income tax levy. I understand that it had been raised by members of the community, and I want to be here tonight to urge the board not to pursue the school income tax and instead consider a reasonable property tax levy that provides stable support for operating our schools. After speaking with families in the community, I believe shifting school funding from property taxes to an income tax would place the burden in the wrong place, create uncertainty for the school district, and put Strongsville residents at a disadvantage. First, school income tax falls only on residents with taxable income. Depending on how the tax is structured, certain types of income could be excluded, which means the burden would fall more heavily on working families and wage earners. Today, our schools are funded by resident homeowners and non-resident property owners, including businesses. All property owners, including businesses, benefit from Strongsville being a desirable place to own property. Our excellent schools protect property values and strengthen our community. If non-resident property owners are removed from the funding tax base, the responsibility shifts away from those who benefit from the community and places the burden solely on the residents. In fact, out-of-state property owners would likely be more drawn to Strongsville, and those non-residents have no real interest in the health and welfare of Strongsville and its community, and that would be devastating for us. A school income tax would exempt businesses that currently pay property taxes to support our schools. Local businesses benefit from having a well-educated workforce. Strongsville residents provide financial support through their taxes, not just for schools, but they provide funding for public safety services, roads, and infrastructure. Local businesses enjoy those benefits, and in return, it is fair that those businesses help support the school system that makes Strongsville a more desirable place to live, work, and invest. I do not see a compelling reason to shift that burden from a shared responsibility away from businesses and on to resident wage earners alone. And if businesses and non-resident property owners no longer pay school taxes through property taxes, working residents will have to make up the difference. Simple math means that residents will have to shoulder the burden alone. I've spoken to many families who have calculated that a school income tax could cost them 3 times or more than the proposed property levy. For many households, that is not just a small adjustment, it's a major financial shift. Second, relying on income tax will create uncertainty for the schools. Property taxes generate a fixed revenue stream. Income tax collections can fluctuate based on employment levels, income change, retirement decisions, and whether residents remain in the city throughout the year. Predictable revenue matters to the school. It allows the district to budget responsibly, plan staffing and programming, and to make long-term financial decisions. Lack of predictability may even impact the school's bond rating. Third, school income tax proposals have overwhelmingly failed recently. A minority of districts have school income taxes, and those districts are largely rural districts without businesses. Where there aren't businesses or many out-of-town property owners, there may be less difference between an income tax and a property tax. That is not true for Strongsville, where our mayor has worked hard to cultivate a strong business community to help ease the tax burden on our residents. Moving to an income tax would give up that advantage. I also spoke with the mayor today. He does not support an income tax school levy. Finally, there has been a lot of speculation about the effort to eliminate property taxes on a statewide basis. We should not make our decisions based on speculation. The proposed elimination of property taxes is generally misguided and fails to account for the realities of how government works. Eliminating property taxes does not mean that taxes are going to go away. Schools, safety forces, roads, trash collection, and other basic services will still require funding through some form of tax. If a constitutional amendment were to pass to eliminate property taxes, the Ohio legislature would likely replace those taxes with either an increase to statewide income tax or sales tax. The state legislature can do that unilaterally. There would be no ballot initiative. If Strongsville were to pass a school income tax, when the state legislature passes that statewide tax, whether it be a sales tax or an income tax, Strongsville residents will be taxed twice by the new statewide initiative as well as our local income tax. Strongsville residents would be better protected if they were to pass a property levy. If property taxes are eliminated, Strongsville residents would then be on equal footing with the majority of Ohio residents rather than being an outlier. I urge the board to decline the invitation to place an income tax on the ballot. Please consider a reasonable property tax levy that keeps the responsibility shared more fairly, provides the district with more predictable funding, and supports the strong schools that Strongsville families and businesses all depend on. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you, Kelly. That concludes public comment. Next on the agenda, we will go into Board of Education Other. And our first item is a levy bond discussion. So thank you guys for being here and speaking tonight. I appreciate it, and you've helped set the stage for what we're about to discuss. I was going to start by talking about 2 nights ago, we did have our second leadership committee meeting here in this room. It was a much smaller attended meeting than our first time. I think we went from about 26, 27 down to 12, I think. Yes. So it was a smaller group, and I know with summer it's hard, vacations and stuff. So I appreciate everybody who was able to make it. We had good discussion, I thought. As it was mentioned, it did go into the income tax discussion versus property tax rather quickly. And there was a lot of agreement with the income tax, I felt like that night in the room. And I was kind of shocked by that. because I've lived here for 26 years and we've always talked about property taxes. And so we've had about 48 hours to digest all of this. And I appreciate you guys coming and talking. Eric, what would you like to add about Tuesday night?
I wish it was more well attended. There was definitely less participation. I think that a lot of reaffirmation on the choices we've already made, the 90 days, the things that we were able to sort of lock in from the first experience we had, it seemed that still resonated with folks, and I thought that was good. I think the property tax and the income tax challenge, in my mind, I want to know more about the income tax. I think that Tuesday night it was incredibly persuasive, and I think that those folks who shared stuff with us today were persuasive as well, and I'd like to have a moment to learn more about it, I guess, and be more prepared about what's going to be for our community. I think the most important thing in kind of my guiding principle is what's going to fund our schools and what's going to help our kids. And I'm using that as kind of the North Star. So if it means putting something in front of the community that doesn't sing with my family and how we operate, I would let the voters choose if that's an option they want to go down. Because the goal in my mind is to get funding for the schools.
Dr. Iva George, do you guys want to add? You were also in the room.
Yeah, I think as we went through the conversation, there were things that were solidified based on the conversation. So some of the things were solidified were continue to go out in November of 26. We put a question out there, should we delay it, pause it a little bit more after people had a month to think about it, and it was pretty unanimous, that we should continue on with November. We asked people to take a look at, last time when we met, everybody agreed that we needed to do, I shouldn't say everybody, the majority agreed that there needed to be some reductions regardless of a levy, and they used kind of a qualitative statement of minimal to moderate reductions. So we asked people to quantify that, what that was from the board discussion in June, which was roughly $2 to $6 million. And the majority came back with that $2 to $3 million range is how they would define minimal to moderate. So I think the board should take that into consideration. Again, the community leaders are providing insight. It's not providing an edict as to what the board needs to do. So it gives that $2 to $3 million range. We asked, as we take a look at the same range the board came up with, that range of 5.5 mils to 7 mils. Now I know that's talking about a property tax levy, but if you change it to dollars, a 12.5 mil revenue from 12.5 to roughly $16 million. Where do you think it should be? They picked the feedback that they shared was at that top end that we should look at revenue in that $15 million range to meet the 90-day cash balance, to keep the reductions at a minimal to moderate level, to be able to last that 5-ish years to move us forward. And then we talked about, Mr. Micko brought up at the last meeting, that overlap year, right? We understand that with the renewal levy plus new money, if it passes in November 26, there could be an overlap year. There's opportunities to address that. The committee feedback was, this one was 100% unanimous, is just keep it as a traditional levy, acknowledge and be transparent that there is an overlap year. But the confusion of an incremental levy, people felt was too much to overcome. And then the last thing that wasn't already talked about was the 070 fund. Again, that had 78.6% support that it should be dissolved. Going to Bonnie's point that she made in her public comment, it does not solve our financial issue. Everything she said was accurate. It gets us an additional year. But from from the community leaders, it was less about what that affords us in the general fund and more about politically, it's a football, that's a talking point, that is a challenge, and acknowledge that good idea, good policy, good practice, but it just doesn't resonate in our community, and we need to move on and eliminate that talking point from that piece of it. So those are the additional results of the discussion that was there.
Thank you. George, would you like to add?
Yeah, just to add on, everything you guys said was pretty much covered it, but just a couple other points was we talked about the incremental. As Dr. Iva said, the feedback was that it gets confusing on that aspect, and if we're concerned with an overlap, they gave another possible solution is ask the county not to collect that last year of the current renewal to avoid that overlap. And then when the property tax, when the income tax was discussed, it was more favorable of a traditional versus the earned for that ask. And I do have a few slides to go over the difference, just to educate the board what school district income tax is, what it's not, and the difference between income and a traditional and an earned as well.
Thank you. Rich, Tim, Michelle, do you guys have any questions since you weren't there?
I mean, the survey and feedback that we got in just this past meeting, I'm an alignment type of guy. I like to be aligned with the leaders of the community. It seems like we're aligned on quite a bit of things. It's just narrowing in on what the actual decision is, and it seems like we have two parallel paths right now, from obviously public comments to what was discussed at the summit or leadership meeting. I like to see those parallel paths and then obviously make an informed decision based upon pros and cons of those parallel paths. But I'm happy to see that we're aligned, at least in my thinking, from what we saw from the summits from June into July, that it aligns with where my head's going as well.
Thank you. You good? Rich, do you have anything?
No, I was just going to say, if it's timely, let's have George do the slides.
Yeah, so as we talked about, a school district income tax levy was proposed at the meeting to be considered. What it is and what it's not a municipal income tax, so it's not, and it's not a shared municipal income tax, it's strictly for the schools, and it's not similar to the city income tax where that applies to workers and residents. This is just strictly for residents that live in the city, not work in the city. There's two types. There's the traditional, which is similar to state income tax, and then there's the earned, which is just for your wages, salaries, tip, and other compensation that you earn. Mainly think of it as W-2 type wages. For a traditional tax base, income that is not taxed in a traditional income tax base is Social Security benefits, disability and survivor benefits, rural retirement benefits, welfare benefits, child support, property received as a gift or inheritance, federal bond interest subject to federal tax but exempt from state, and workers' compensation benefits. What it is included in traditional income tax is wages, salaries, tips, interest, dividends, unemployment compensation, self-employment to the extent included by the Ohio Adjusted Gross Income, taxable scholarships and fellowships, pensions, annuities, taxable IRA distributions, capital gains, state and local bond interest, and alimony received. So that's all included in a traditional tax base. What's not included, the main thing, would be the Social Security benefits for the older population. For a earned income tax, It includes only wages, salaries, tips, and other compensations net of earnings from self-employment. The tax excludes all other types of income and deductions that are included in the traditional income tax base, such as interest, dividends, capital gains, pensions. So those are all excluded from an earned. It's just mainly, if you think about it, just W-2 type income. And I did link to the presentation for those at home, to the agenda, the guide from the Ohio Department of Taxation that listed those items to kind of get additional details if interested. The process, just like a property tax levy, to kind of get going. It's a two-step process to be on the ballot for any school district income tax, similar to a property tax. First is the resolution of necessity. So that declares declare necessity to raise a specified amount of money for school district purposes. Declare either a traditional or an earned, and must be delivered to the Ohio Department of Taxation no later than 100 days prior to the election. The Department of Taxation receives receives the resolution. They send within a 10-day period. They send us back the certification, and then there's a second resolution similar to a property tax. That's what puts it on the ballot, and that second resolution specifies a period of time. For a property tax, that happens in Resolution 1, but for the income tax, that happens in Resolution 2. It could be for 5 years, it could be for many number of years as we set it, or it could be for a continuing period of time. We must specify an effective date. They all begin on January 1st, and specify the tax rate must be in 0.25% increments. And then it must be delivered to the Board of Elections no later than 90 days prior to the election. In this case, it would be August 5th, prior to August 5th. And then the other piece that I have linked to the agenda as well is a chart. This comes from the Department of Taxation. The two columns here is the traditional base, the traditional income, school district income tax, and the earned income tax, and the rate and the appropriate rates, what it would generate, and then the equivalent millage. So for example, if I'm looking at my first highlight, I'll try and blow it up a little bit more. So the traditional base yields more than earned income tax, but if we're looking at a 0.5% or 0.5% of school district income tax, that would generate about 12.2 million, which is the equivalent of a 5.3 mil operating property levy. For that same 0.5%, for an earned income, it's about 8.9%, and that would be, or 8.9 million, and that would be the equivalent millage of about 3.84 mils for property tax. And then since the chart has it by 0.25 increments, but you can only prove them in 0.25. It's just, as they say, it's just a reference point. So the next level from a 0.5 would be a 0.75. For a traditional tax base, it's about 18.5 million. The equivalent millage is 8 mils. For an earned income tax, that 0.75% will be about 13.3 million, which is the equivalent of 5.8 mils. And then a couple other differences. On the first resolution, we would pick the dollar amount. If we would move forward with, we'd pick the dollar amount. Then the certification process, they send us back the appropriate percentage that goes with that dollar amount. And then the other piece that's slightly different from a property tax versus school district income tax as part of the process. For the first resolution, it only requires 3 affirmative votes. For the second resolution, for a property tax, it requires 4 affirmative votes. But for a school district income tax, it's 3 affirmative votes. They're just different Ohio Revised Code sections, and just the way the law was passed was different. So just trying to think of anything else. Any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
So one of the challenges that I'm recognizing in the moment is the having to put an income tax levy at the 0.25. So let's say we went at the 0.25 increments. Let's say we told the county that we need $15,389,125, which is exactly halfway between 0.5 and 0.75. What are they going to do?
Go to 0.75?
So they would go up.
Yeah.
Okay. I do think that's a hurdle for us. We have a little more control on the property tax in terms of, we can go 0.1, right, increments? And I do think the amount we need is actually in between those two, So it's not a complete hypothetical. I do think that's where we fall. I don't think 0.5 is enough, and 0.75 is probably too much for voters. We can't accomplish, I mean, I'm happy to have the extra because it puts our additional reductions rate closer to what Cameron shared that was palatable to those community leaders. I'm just not sure that's the amount that the community is going to be willing to pay. So I think property taxes allows us a little more specificity in the amount that we would want to put to tax for our residents.
Other questions, comments? All right.
The other thing I would add to, not just that, point of reference is for all these, whether it's a property tax or income tax, the first resolution declaring it of necessity, that is step one in all these processes, and that just gets the certification process going from each taxing authority, whether for property tax, it's the county, for an income tax, it's the Department of Taxation. It's the second piece, which we would need a special meeting for regardless, to accept that certification. We can only accept one, and that's what moves forward with the Board of Elections. So just wanted to clarify that piece. This first resolution here is just to get the certifications, and we can do multiple. The second one is, got to pick one and move forward with.
So as far as path forward for today, obviously the deadline's coming up, right? We don't want to make a rushed decision, but at the same time, is our outcome today to have like a number for income tax and a number for millage, which obviously gives us the number of reductions we potentially need. Are those the paths forward that we need to decide today, so that way we have the two paths? And I talked about it obviously a few minutes ago. It narrows us down, so that way come next meeting, we make the decision on property tax or income tax at this millage or at this percentage, so that way we can obviously get to the ballot and start messaging appropriately, right? I think that's what we need to do today.
And we are able to do that. We can pass two resolutions today.
Oh, I have another question for George. Sure. Sorry to sidetrack that, but with the property tax levies, we certify a certain amount, we vote on a certain amount, but we don't ever collect at that millage. Is that correct? We don't collect all the way up.
That's because of our collection rate. So we certify, for example, whatever the millage is, it generates a dollar amount.
Right.
And then that's what, based on the valuations, that's what gets taxed. And what could happen too is we'll pass a millage amount now in November, and then at the end of every year, this is more during a revaluation or a 3-year update, but even during the 2 years in between, there could be some value changes. So the tax rates could slightly adjust based on House Bill 920. But what's tax is pretty close to what we collect less the collection rate. So this is approved at 100%, and then assuming that there's I think our current collection rate's at 96%. So of all the tax bills that go out, there's about 96% that come back.
So what I was wondering about is that also true then for income tax? Like, let's say we put the .75 on and voters vote to pass it. Do we always collect 100%? I mean, if they pay,
If they pay.
it would never be reduced.
Well, it could be. So there's no House Bill 920 effect for income tax. Now for property tax, could be reduced as well in the event that all the citywide values go down. The rates can only go as far up as the approved millage rate. So there could be a potential there, but the unlikelihood. But for a school district income tax, it's based on the economy of the local area. So if, again, there's no House Bill 920. So if the valuation in wages goes up every year, then we'll see an increase in the collection. Same thing if the earners in the city goes down, you could potentially see a decrease.
Thank you.
So to continue down that vein, one of the threads in the larger discussion is unvoted tax increases. And different school districts getting large increases because of the way the law works.
Right.
To start that conversation, that hasn't happened in any severe or extreme way in Strongsville. But in income tax, if an individual homeowner got a raise, their income tax goes up, is that correct?
That is correct.
And if if they lose their job, their income tax goes down.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what we're saying is we're just pegging a percentage, and then whatever happens, we get that amount.
Right.
So if you get a raise, you get a bonus, you get an anything, all of that is and you're a resident of Strongsville, because I'm not sure if that's well understood, that if you come into Strongsville as a wage earner, this doesn't apply. It is only income tax for Strongsville residents. But we do have that issue of the voter having to consider whether they want to attach their future income to a school district income tax. Because, you know, the one thing that I think gets lost is we talk about it as if it's chess, but the voter is the one who has to make the decision, and they're the ones that have to take a look at it. And so the question I wanted to kind of plumb is, on the one hand, I think there's an attitude, you know, whatever way the medicine works, whatever way it goes down, who are we to question it? But we also are in a position where I think we need to evaluate, is it reasonable to expect this to pass? And if I look at the data in Ohio, we had, I mean, just in May, Parma and Independence both approached it. Parma, their demographics are different than ours, but Independence, I think their demographics are very similar, and they rejected it. And I went to the trouble of trying to find other data. There are very few, now let's be honest, there are very few any taxes that are passing right now. The May levy, 33% passed, and when you dig into it, the majority of those were renewals. But I have concerns. I was going to say heartburn. I have concerns that whether income tax makes any kind of sense, and I have serious concerns about whether it makes any kind of sense, but even if it did, to say this is what we as a board want to move forward to, I want better odds that this would resonate. And right now, I don't see any history that says an income tax would pass. And I certainly, you know, it is July, and we have been told we have a messaging problem. So now we're going to message something brand new for not just Strongsville, but something brand new for every school district in Cuyahoga County and something brand new for the majority of districts in the counties that surround us. And the thing that I keep on coming back to is we should be proud of the fact that we have done a very good job. We are number 2 in property tax rates in the county. And so to me, I do think we need to unpack that because I don't see how we go forward with a brand-new school district income tax that no other city in Cuyahoga County has ever passed when we are the number 2 lowest property tax city. We are in an anti-tax environment. We are in an anti-tax mood. I understand all of that, but the history of school districts in Ohio for over 50 years have relied on property taxes. There are a bunch of issues with the property tax groups. There's a lot of issues with just people and the economy right now. But I am hard pressed to find a path to success that says we should be the pioneers of this taxation issue. That the school district in Strongsville, Ohio, is the one that's going to suddenly say we have the solution. I'm afraid that if we go forward with a school district income tax, it will fail. And if I had to predict, it'll fail. And so that's, if I had to predict, a lot of things are going to fail, but at least property tax is well understood, and it is not other people have said it differently. The math is, for me, pretty clear. If you make the number of taxpayers smaller to generate the same amount of money, all of those taxpayers have to pay more. And in a school district income tax, the majority of those taxpayers are families, wage earners, people, and I'm going to look at Tim, but people that are in that bracket. And so we're solving the problem of retirees on the backs of our families. And I think that retirees that are fixed income and low income, that is something that needs to be addressed. I don't think anyone disagrees with that, but I don't see how switching to a school district income tax in the long term fixes that problem without creating a whole bunch of new ones.
George, can you talk about the collection of the income tax as well? I don't think we've touched on that
Yeah.
yet, how it's not the same as
So-
property tax.
So let me just, before I do that, let me just give context to how property tax collections work. So if property tax is approved in November, it'll be for tax year 2026. So the tax year is, or the collection year is a year lag behind the tax year. So right now, I think tax bills just went out for the county. So those tax bills are for tax year calendar year 25, collection year 26. So tax year 26 that we're currently in, those collections will be during calendar year 27. So if levy is approved in November, property tax levy is approved in November, that'll be for tax year 26. So we'll start collecting on it in calendar year 27. So with the current advance schedule, I don't know if the county's going to change. They send out a memo today that they're going to put their earlier memorandum on pause. But the way it currently works is we get an advance in January, an advance in February, and our settlement in March. So essentially, we get revenue 3 times a year, but for the most part, you get half of that levy, half of those dollars in the first half of the year. And then in July, you get an advance. In August, you get the second settlement. For this year, they're pushing it back to early September, but you do get it the second half in those 2 months. So you get that whole year collection, so that whole year revenue, and 50% one half and 50% the other half. Now for a income tax, The state sent me, or the Department of Taxation sent me the timeline. It's linked to the agenda in this resources folder, but there's a collection timeline to kind of briefly go over, and I'll show you the impact. The way they explained it is you'll get that full year revenue in about 6 quarters. So that's a year and a half until you collect the full year. So again, if it's passed in November, then it becomes, or if it's passed in November, it becomes effective January. So that January 27 is the tax year. So think about how you pay your federal and your state income taxes. You paid this past April, you paid for calendar year 2025. So there's the year lag there. So they break it down in quarters. You'll get the money in quarters. For the first quarter, which ends in April, you'll get about 5%, or 5.9%. That's the average. And that's roughly from any withholdings. Then in July of year one, you'll get another 15%, so you're cumulative at 20%. In October, you'll get another 15%, and again, these are from withholdings and early payers, so that you're a cumulative average of 36.6%. The last quarter ends in December. In January, you get about another 15%, which is now a cumulative average of about 52%. And then April of year two, you get about 24%, so now you're a cumulative average of 76. And then in July of year two, you get about 40%, which will be based primarily from all the people filing their state income tax. Now you're at a cumulative average of 117%, which now accounts the year two monies plus the year two, plus the year one. So how that would look, if you go to my first spreadsheet that's linked there, I do have a tab called, there's one for an earned and a traditional, but for the traditional, let's just say at 0.5 traditional income tax was passed. In year one, which is for us is April of 2027. So April of 2027, that's fiscal year 27. We would receive 5.9% of that annual amount, which is about $722,000. So that's the next collection wouldn't be till July of 27. Now that's fiscal year 28. So the first fiscal year, we would only collect for fiscal year 27, we would only collect about $700,000 versus a property tax. We would have received half of the value of that property tax. In fiscal year 27, it would have came July through March. And then in fiscal year 28, we would collect about $8.6 million, which is the annual amount, for reference, I forgot to mention, the annual amount is $12.2 million. So in year two, we would collect 8.6 of that 12.2. And then in year three is when you finally get that full year, which would be fiscal year 29, about 13 million, because now you're getting some overlap between the two fiscal years, or the two collection years. So that's kind of how that works first in comparison to a property. But that collection timeline, these numbers are factored in the charts in the front. So do you want me to go over what updates I made to those charts too? So we added more charts due to more scenarios, but I do have them numbered. So charts 1 and 2 is combined levy assets. It's replacing the renewal with a new 5-year based at a new rate. These ones do account for the overlap, that 1-year overlap. So that's what 1 and 2 are. There's no change there. Charts 3 and 4, that is the incremental that Mr. Micco had proposed last time. If it's passed in November, we collect a new portion of it, and then when the renewal falls off, the renewal portion kicks in. So that's what 3 and 4 are. 5 and 6, those are Same concept as the incremental, but rather the incremental is going forward with the new levy and not collecting the last year of the renewal. So 5 and 6 have a similar impact to 3 and 4 of the incremental. So the impact of that is similar. 7 and 8 is replacing replacing the renewal and asking for new money through a traditional income tax. I did have 3 scenarios, a 0.5, 0.75, and a 1%. The 1% is just there for reference purposes. Charts 9 and 10 is the same, but via an earned income tax rather than a traditional tax. And 11 and 12 is similar to 1 and 2, but if it was approved in calendar year 27 versus November, what the impact would be.
It's a lot of different scenarios. Out of those 12, are there any that we could take off the table?
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Is now an appropriate time to talk about the 070 fund? Because if we determine what and if we want to do with the 070 fund, that collapses a bunch of
does.
these.
Yeah.
And that would be one way to simplify the conversation, or at least simplify the confusion from all the charts.
Okay.
So
So talk about,
with your permission, I propose, I would like us to consider dissolving the 070 fund and moving the amounts back to the general fund. I am, from a fiscal prudence standpoint, as someone who advocated for the 070 fund strongly, I'm loath to do it, but the 070 fund has become a 4-letter word, and the sooner we take it out of our mouths, the sooner I will stop putting quarters in the swear jar. So I think I don't need to discuss it any deeper than if there's the will of the board, we should move forward with, at our next meeting or whatever the next reasonable meeting is, to eliminate the 070 fund and move the funds back to the general fund.
other comments on that?
I think that feedback was heard loud and clear from a majority of different angles, whether it was today, whether it was other summits, community leaders. I think that's appropriate.
I agree also.
Eric?
I agree.
Same. It just takes one more talking point off the table, as you said. So I think we're all in agreement with that.
Okay. Well, at either the next meeting or an August meeting, I'll have the resolution. Though, just logistically on how that works is we can't, I did some more, after the last meeting, I did some research on it. We can't leave anything in there. Once you dissolve it, you have to move it all back. You could reestablish it for any piece that you want to keep in there. For example, the one thing that was on my mind is the baseball, softball fields, because they're going out for bid and whatnot. And we didn't count it as part of the 15 million. So those dollars would have to come back. We could either reestablish it with those dollars in there, or we could transfer it to the PI fund and pay for it at a PI fund, or creating a separate fund for just the baseball, softball, turf, because we would also at some point have sponsorship deals going into it, similar like we do for the football stadiums, the football fields.
Okay.
So logistically, we'll just have to figure out a different fund to move those monies into.
So I would recommend that, George, my question is there any financial benefit to reconstituting a 070 type fund versus moving it to the PI fund?
I would look to see if we could do it. The football turf funds, they were set up in a separate 004 fund. And that was set up due to the timing of our construction, and those are mainly for tight construction accounts, is to either create a new 003 and kind of moving both of them in there, but separate ones, keeping them separate, or to see if I could create an 004 for that. But those are PI type accounts.
Yeah, and I don't know if we need to discuss this now, but I'm comfortable with creating 004 funds.
Yeah.
I don't think we want to envision another 070 fund.
I think the least amount of times we say 070, the better.
Thank you.
Okay, so that does collapse our list.
And based upon feedback we've gotten, traditional, if we're still talking income tax, obviously we got property tax and income tax. Just trying to collapse this even more. I think traditional was the route that we wanted to go with.
I think that was what I understood was proposed at the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
Just trying to narrow us down from the 12 scenarios back down to hopefully 1 or 2 or 3.
Well, to that end, I think I'm in favor of removing the incremental. I think the messaging becomes very complicated. And, you know, as we said before, that is a constant challenge, and it's going to remain so, just because of the nature of communication in the 21st century. So I would say I'm happy to remove those as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. So we're pretty much looking at the right-hand
So
charts, right?
the only conversation or question I have, so on the one hand, the way to get around's the wrong way to phrase it. The way to keep the increase level and not have a bubble and then a drop. One way is this incremental levy. The other way is to tell the county we don't want to collect the full amount. Factually, and I want George to confirm, the incremental levy, the board has no ability to change that after it's voted on. So the incremental levy allows the voter to say, this is how it's going to happen. For the other scenario, the board would have to say, when it passes, we will do this. But there's nothing legally obligating us to do this. And one of the things that the survey brought out was a lack of trust in the board. And so the only thing I want us to consider is, on the one hand, doing the incremental levy becomes tortured language, and we have to message that. But on the other hand, the message is, trust us, and we'll take care of it. And I just want to have some open discussion because I'm concerned about that message.
I understand your concern. I do think there's a third option, and that is to message that we know there's an overlap. We accounted for that overlap, adjusted the millage accordingly, and now we're making one ask. That is my preferred message, because it takes that component out of play, because I do think saying, trust us, we'll do this, is not going to sit well, right? And I also think that the language becomes so cumbersome to try to explain the incremental levy. That is a no-go. I'd rather just say, yes, we know there's an overlap. It's part of the, challenge of combining these two, but it is the right move right now. We've accounted for the funds. Moving on. That would be my suggestion.
I just think we'd lose voters the minute they see, a resolution declaring it necessary for 2 additional tax levies. I feel like it's.
There is no two, that isn't.
That's the way it reads.
That's part of the language for an incremental.
But it's one vote.
It is.
Yeah, okay, I understand. There's no easy, straightforward answer. I'm concerned at the idea of just saying we've accounted for it, because it does disregard people who are dealing with cash flow issues. And we continue to talk about that there are people who, there's inflation, there's increase in groceries, there's increase in that, et cetera. And to just say, you'll have that 1 year jump and deal with it. I don't know how none of this resonates well, right? But that's the third or gripping hand.
And then just as a reminder, if we go that option, that puts our reductions to keep with the metrics the board has said by an additional $2.4 million.
So if
Expound
we-
on that?
If
Yeah.
you say either option, except Michelle's, if you say incremental or don't collect, if we want to have 90 days cash on hand, you're still following George's incremental chart. Correct, George?
Say that last bit, I was typing
If
something.
we say, hey, if this passes, we're going to tell the county not to collect the fifth year of the renewal levy, we're following the incremental chart, which
Correct.
says, in the range of where you're looking, to make it 90 days cash on hand in year 4, it's going to increase the reductions we have to make by $2 to $2.5 million.
Correct.
So just keep that in consideration as you're weighing the options. Incremental, don't collect the fifth year, want to keep the same metrics, you have to increase reductions to make that all work.
Yeah.
Michelle's option, you're just looking at the top right-hand corner chart right now.
Mrs. Hausum? Do we need to discuss the 90 days, same as cash? Or 90 days cash? Because I think it is important that we discuss it, because I think Cameron's done a great job, and I thank you for doing that, of saying the 90 days, same, 90 days, 90 days cash is a metric. And it was a metric we put into place as, along with the 070 fund as far as our fiscal prudence, our financial backbone. I think it's on the table. Parma's metric is 60 days.
On that thought process, you could look at the 60 days, which is going to adjust the reductions. Or you could look at, here's the annual value of the levy that we feel, instead of millage or income tax rates, you could take a look and say, hey, I think this $1 million a year is the sweet spot for where we could go as a district. And then when we come back with the specifics of the reduction plan, then you have the ability to adjust and be able to say, hey, we want to get reductions down to $2.5, $3 million. That gets us to 75 days, 60 days, whatever. So I think depends on the appetite of the board. If that's an important key decision, I look at it as that's a number that's going to be there regardless. We're just deciding how big or small it's going to be. And yes, it relates to the millions of dollars amount, but that's adjustable after. I think the key decision is how many millions of dollars do we want this levy to generate every year? And then everything else flows from there. So just a thought to consider.
So we still have the flexibility to slide that 90 days down once we narrow in on the reductions.
Yeah, that whole part's flexible based on board guidance. Here's the cash on hand we want. Here's then there's the reductions we feel comfortable with right now. Based on the current pathway, after tonight, you're going to lose your flexibility on the amount the income tax or property tax is going to generate. So that's the key decision for tonight.
Yeah.
The rest of it, in the next 3 weeks, we've got ability to move.
Okay. And I know,
And then to Mr. Miko's point too, down the road too, also possibly looking at our board, its policy, so it could go to the policy committee to see if we need to, although we acknowledge we may deviate from our board policy, but looking, do we need to adjust that board policy? Like specifically to that cash balance policy, that also says the 90 days, also references the 070 fund, so we might want to revisit it anyways, just for that portion of it.
right,
It's not a might for me. We need to revisit it,
Yeah.
and I think we need to revisit both the language for the 070 fund along with the 90 days cash balance. Because right now, it requires conversations, and I don't want the board to be in a position where we have a policy that we say, yep, and we shrug our shoulders and move on. If this is the financial next 5 years, I think we acknowledge it at a policy level.
All right. So when talking to George today, he did suggest that we start with a dollar amount and then work our way back into the millage and the percentage for the income tax. So do you guys want to start with the property tax, the dollar amount? Or, I'm sorry, no, we start with the dollar amount and then we'll go back, sorry.
Dollar amount of annual value of levy or reductions?
No, value of levy. Michelle, you had thrown out the 15.
Yeah, I deleted it off my phone. I was looking to see if it was still there. I mean, I think the sweet spot's somewhere in between 12 and 18. And if you look at what we've highlighted previously, the highest we said we were interested in the previous meetings was 15.8. So I think it's somewhere in there. That requires us going back to the data of what might be palatable to voters, what could pass. And the data says that once you cross over the 7 threshold, it becomes more challenging. So if that's the case, then, but we can do something like 6.9. And I know we've done that in the past.
I think that was our 2019,
That was 5.9.
5.9.
Yeah.
Okay.
Taking all the things into consideration from hearing everybody and obviously all the numbers and files. Yeah, I mean, I know we had that range of the 5.5 to 7 mil, but just taking everything into consideration, I've narrowed into the 6.5 to 7 range. Like that's where my head is at now, just based upon the reductions, based upon the 90-day cash. Obviously, we can talk about that in the future, knowing that that's some options. Minimizing impact to our current students, future generations, to the people that have the jobs. That's the ultimate thing on my mind. And that's, I think that's where the numbers lie. I mean, in anything, obviously, in business and anything, you're gonna have reductions. I mean, that's where we're at today because of, possibly past failures or just in general where we're at with the economy and the world. But I think that the 6.5 to 7 and is a 6.75 is a 6.9. I'm pretty narrowed in on that range.
Between 14.5 and 15.5 million, basically.
Yeah, correct.
Is it reasonable to target the dollar at 15 million and then work backwards?
Yeah.
Because
that's
that's, I
fair.
think, is a number that makes sense. And then, I'm not going to argue deeply whether 6.6, 6.5, I'm going to argue whichever one's lower.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts, opinions on 15 million?
I like 15 million, but from a presentation perspective, I also like 6.4. I know that's a little less.
6.4 million.
No.
Yeah, but not, I mean.
It's important to me that, again, that amount is the new number. But I think other people are not going to make the argument about the renewal falling off. I think we have to make that argument that it is, whatever that number comes out, but as far as new taxes, you need to subtract the old one.
Correct. That's where our messaging needs to be clear.
Which again is why I think
Everybody needs to know
15
it.
million is reasonable, and I also think wherever that plays out at 6.6 or what have you, I think that's reasonable, and I think
So
that.
for that I have 6.7. 6.7 generates about 15.4. With the 98% collection rate, it's about 15.1.
6.7 is very timely.
I didn't even think of that.
I mean, you want to talk about it. The kids can make fun of us still beyond that joke.
That's right.
I like it.
And for reference, 6.4 is about 14.7 at 100%, 14.5 at full percent. And the difference between 6.4 to 6.7 is $10 per 100,000 evaluation. 234 versus 224
Annual.
annually per 100,000.
Eric, can you clarify why 6.4?
I think it's just psychologically.
Under 6.5?
Yeah, and even that is a stretch. And I talked about trying to avoid stretches.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is as stretchy as I feel comfortable making it. And it feels more like a scientific ask than a round number. Like,
Right, that makes sense too.
it's calculated.
Right.
We're asking for what we need. You know, I suggested before, we have a get to green plan. We would base all the numbers to make sure that we can get to green. By tweaking the number of days for cash on hand, and then also balancing that with the amount of cuts we feel we have to make or can tolerate to make that happen.
That makes sense, rather than just saying like, having the perception that we pulled the number out of the air, 15 million, if it's a little bit more precise.
I don't think we pulled the number out of the air. I mean.
No, we don't want the
I think
perception.
the number is reasonable. You know, I don't know if we would argue, I don't know. 6.4 versus 6.7, I think 6.7, the 15 million is going to require serious work as a board and as administration to make those cuts. And 6.4 is going to take even more effort. And we're going to start getting into muscle. We're not going to be getting away from fat. We're going to start getting into muscle. So, and again, I think we can go round and round, but I don't think it's going to fail based on 6.4 versus 6.7. I don't think it's going to fail based on 6.4 versus 6.6. So, but the 15 million, if you look at those numbers, those are reasonable numbers. Those require cuts to our budget, but I think they balance everything in a slightly more balanced, nuanced way than going even lower. I mean, I'm comfortable with 6.6, I'm comfortable with 6.7. We start, you know, to say 6.4 and there was something about that other than it sounded better.
Other thoughts? Michelle, what are you thinking?
I'm not sure. Well, I was first trying to figure out how Richard arrived at the 15 million as the number, right? And I think that last explanation helped me because I'm looking at the whole chart and that puts us somewhere in the range of $3 million additional dollars of cuts. So when you say you're trying to make them all seem more reasonable, I can see how you arrived at the 15 million. I also understand the wanting to be under the 6.5. So is there an answer of just 6.5? I mean, I guess, is that But do we lose the potential advantage of being, I don't know how much that matters to people, or are they concerned about the dollar amount? It's probably the dollar amount to their 100,000.
Right.
In which case, as long as we're focusing on that, I don't think the millage matters as much. I don't think, most people can't spell it, so I don't think, and autocorrect doesn't spell it.
Right.
Right, it always autocorrects to mileage, so, I think people are more concerned about their wallet.
It's $10 difference per 100K
A year.
a year.
Per year. So we want to split the difference and say 6.5?
I would avoid suspiciously round sort of like numbers like that. But maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe Michelle's right.
I'm just not sure, I can see both arguments, I don't know, I do think at the end of the day, it's probably the dollar amount in the pocket.
I feel like in our messaging, that's what we talk about.
It falls on us to message it, and
Yeah.
that we need help with that.
I know I've talked a lot about the feedback that we've gotten and what we've heard from other people. The suggestion was to aim for the 7, because that gives us around the amount of cuts that everybody's expecting, which is why going to the 15 million at the 6.7 minimizes reductions. It gives us a clear number of what we're going after, versus, like they sell a house for $199,999, right? I think we gotta message it, we gotta get out there, do the work. 6.7 minimizes the cuts, either way. I think that's the right direction for us to go.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge an email that the board received this week that pointed out something I thought was crucial to think about, and it said the complaints from the voters are not that we have too many services, that we're providing too much, that we're, over-providing for those students. The complaint has been that we've had too much money to provide those services, and to try to keep the students whole. And I thought that was a really insightful point to say, you're right, the voters were not upset at our services, they were upset that we had money in the bank. Now we don't, and we're looking at cutting the services they never thought were the problem. So if I consider it from that lens, I think we push a little higher to try to maintain as many of those services as we can, and we need that dollar amount to do it. That's where we are right now, and I think that we can make that case. And I think that's actually a pretty good tagline.
So you're comfortable with the 6.7?
Yeah.
So George, if we can just make sure we're aware of the rules, we can go with the dollar amount and then that gets validated, and then the board can always adjust low. We can't adjust higher.
No, that was with the bond.
So that was with the bond.
This one, once we receive the certification back, we're approving the certificate, we have to move forward with the certification.
Fine.
Yeah, so this locks you into
The number.
the number.
But we can do more than one,
We can.
and then choose to choose which one to do.
Right.
So I'm comfortable with 6.7. I'm comfortable with the message. I'm comfortable with the overall everything. But if we want to have some flexibility and give all of us time to listen to the voters respond, to think about Eric's concerns more deeply, perhaps we put the 2 forward and then we'll figure out which one we're going with. But I'm going to ask Eric to go up to 6.5.
That's fine.
All right, I'll add another agenda item here in a minute, but before we do the voting on the agenda items, I kind of like how we're solidifying each one. That way we can go, that way when we have the resolutions, we can kind of have the numbers to plug in. So then the second decision that we had on here was the incremental. So that just seemed, no one was in favor of it, so we could just kind of delete that off the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, especially if we're talking about adding 2-point-something million of cuts on top of the number we just said was reasonable. I think it makes it unreasonable, then we'd have to rehab the conversation we just had again.
I concur.
Yep. George, I made the copy for you.
Oh, okay. Awesome, thank you. And then the last item was the property tax, or not, the income tax.
So we can't go.
If we wanted to move forward with it.
Right, right. So if we use that dollar amount, 15 million, that doesn't line up with.
But that's all we have to give to the county, right? Is
This
the
one goes to
15
the-
million.
This one goes to the state.
So, I'm sorry, to the state. We give them 15 million and they tell us the rest.
We can, but if we want one back that aligns to the table,
Still be the 0.75 anyway.
It'll be the
Well, that's what-
0.75.
Yeah,
the
Yes.
.75 would be the 18.5.
yeah.
I gotcha. I think there's a difference between us stating the amount that we'd like to support and sending it to the state and having them determine the percentage rather than us just determining the percentage. So if that's an option, that would be my
I believe
suggestion.
so.
So reading it as a resolution with the dollar amount as opposed to the percentage.
Right, and then,
Okay.
I just want to make sure. So it does say the state law maintains we round to the closest .25. So it does not necessarily round it up, it would go to the nearest.
So 15 would go down.
It would go down to 12. So what's the difference between the two?
So we're suggesting going forward with 6.4, 6.7, and then the income tax at 15 million.
Yes, pending what George is looking up over there.
3.1.
Right. And that's a different conversation.
Does that keep us moving forward?
Well, they're both in between. It's kind of equal. It's pretty close.
It's like 3.7 to 3.5. 3.7 away from the 0.5%, 3.5 away from the,
So it should
Oh, wait, is it?
if they're doing it to
should be, yeah.
That's what the law says, right, George?
Hold on. I thought I got the same. I was just wondering if I did the math wrong. .1. 3.1. I'm getting 3.1 for both.
Well, I was just doing the 15 million as an average. You did the exact, so you're,
Oh, I got,
yeah.
you're right. So which one was closer?
It would go up.
There you go, 0.75.
It would
Yeah,
go
we go
up.
up.
Okay.
So 15 million. And then the other question was, I think we eliminated what we were eliminating them, traditional versus an earned.
I
So
think
we
did. I
want it
think
to be
we
a
said
traditional? Okay. All right. So I'll fill in the blanks. in a
Before
second.
George does that, I'm just, if we're doing the property tax at two options of 6.4 and 6.7, I understand the logic of the, put it out there and see what the state says, but we only have two options for the income tax in that range. could we, just to alleviate an option that we can't come back to, do just say a half and a .75?
We could, but we would put the dollar, I think the dollar amounts in there. That would equal those.
You researched it more than I am. I'm just saying, like, we've given ourselves two options for property taxes.
We just need one
Just-
for this.
Just doing one for this, why, we
Yeah.
know what the two options are
Yeah,
in the
100%.
range, why not just give ourselves two options?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I understand what you're saying, just processing it. So what dollar amounts? Would we pick a dollar amount, or would we just pick the dollar amounts that equate to those percentages? The .5.
Well, this is, I guess that's what I was just calculating, because if I use the 15 million, which is what the number we were discussing was, which is approximately where we landed with the, with the property tax, it's actually, it's closer in dollar amount to the 0.5. I don't know about percentage or whatever, but it's closer.
Oh, so I
If
see.
15 million is closer to 12,244,330 than it is to 18,533,920. In which case, it would go down. So,
So hang on a sec. I see
That's-
what, I think I got it. Sorry, it took me a second. I think I got it. So a 6.4 would generate, 14.7 million at 100%. At 98%, it would generate about 14.4.
okay,
14,457,000. So we could use that number as one of them. And then the 6.7 at 100% generates 15,427,000. At the collection rate, it generates 15.1.
that's not going to change our percentages, though.
Okay.
Those are both below the points, I know you can't use it, but they're both below the .625,
Right.
so it would go down
Bump
to
up.
the .5.
So the safest thing to do is to give ourselves both options, 0.5, 0.75, if we're going to keep an income tax on the table. I agree with Karen.
Are we going to keep an income tax on the table?
I know there are board members who wanted time to process and think about it. You know, it's only been 48 hours since we started talking about this.
I'm not leading, I'm asking.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's consensus that we don't want to do one, then we shouldn't go forward. But if there isn't consensus and we want to keep it on the table, then that's the path forward. But I continue to come back to, we already acknowledge we have an uphill battle. Income tax just means it's straight up, in my analysis.
Well, quite bluntly for me, I don't want to come away from here with 4 paths. I want to come away with 2, so that way I have time to correctly think about each one, and do the pros and cons, back of the napkin type of thing for myself, and then come away with an informed decision. So I can appreciate the 6.7, 6.4, and then the 2 percentages on the income tax portion. I'm more along the lines of, let's agree on 1 millage amount at the, whatever dollar value that is, and then 1 income tax, and then we have 2 weeks to get some more information and digest some more. Obviously, a lot of people that were here today did their research and saw that mostly rural counties do income tax, so this would flip us upside down from traditional thinking, but we failed multiple levies in the past, and we have to think a little bit differently possibly right now. So I want a little bit of time at least to see the 2 pass, not 4 personally. That's where I'm at. I'm just not about 4 pass.
So it seemed like the consensus was 6, 7 on the property tax path. And if we use that same consensus, we would want something income tax-wise, and that would generate 15 million. And that looks, according to a traditional, that looks like a .625 rate.
But we can't do. You'd have to bump up to the .75.
So that gives us our options.
Yeah.
So 6.7 and a .75.
I'm comfortable with that as the two options. I'll start.
And then just to clarify, for the income tax, do we want to put the 15 million in there and let the state round up, or do we just put the value of the 7.75 in?
If we know what the answer is, then let's just give the
For the
answer.
The 15 million is going to go down to 0.5. So that's not going to help us.
I don't see that doing a .5 as a possibility.
Right.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing in general about the income tax, because the conversation tonight is painting this in a particular lens that I don't think is entirely fair. This income tax was brought to us over a year ago, and we have been thinking about it and looking at it. And Rich spoke to the points earlier. We were acutely aware of those that were on the ballot in Cuyahoga County in May. We watched them, we knew the outcome. And given that data, we didn't continue to dive down that rabbit hole. That's why there were no charts to begin with about income tax at that time. And then since this discussion has come up from a community member, we felt it in fairness to give it some more thought. So I just wanted to clarify that. It's not that we're not paying attention or we don't know that income tax is an option. Those are all things that we have been paying attention to and watching, but we're also trying to listen to our community and give it a fair shake. So that's why this conversation today looks like we're scrambling. It's because we're considering numbers in a way that we hadn't before because we didn't consider it a legitimate option. We are giving it its due diligence now to try to see if it is a legitimate option.
And to clarify, the 48 hours, like Eric wasn't on the board, Tim wasn't on the board. You're correct. Rich, myself, and you have had more time and watching the communities around us, but this is new for Eric and Tim.
Well, and to that point, there were two of you in the meeting the other day, and the rest of us
Right, exactly.
had it through the grapevine, so we'd have even less time to process, so.
Yep. So,
Okay, I think I filled in the resolutions. Mrs. Hausman, I'll turn it back. If you refresh your screen.
I'm refreshing now. If everybody
have to refresh
refreshes,
this.
the resolutions will be updated. Any other last minute questions or discussion before I read the first resolution?
So just, because we haven't really had a chance to talk about it, and we don't have another business meeting in July, so I just wanted to share with the board and the public, in addition to the school levy that we're considering, Strongsville City has a 1 mil fire levy that they're considering. The county is considering a Health and Human Services levy of 2.5 mils. The County Board of Developmental Disabilities is considering a additional levy of 2.25 mils. RTA is considering a 0.5% increase to the sales tax. They have announced they're not going to pursue that in November. They're going to potentially pursue that in May of '27. And the county is also considering a 0.15% increase in sales tax to deal with the Cavaliers and the Guardians facilities and the repairs on those. So it will be there will be a lot of asks.
Thanks for sharing that.
Mrs. Hausman,
Yes.
too, I think it was assumed that this was replacing the renewal. The resolution one for the operating is a 5-year renewal. That's the resolution that's there.
Can you say that again?
That since we were replacing the renewal,
Yes.
this is a 5-year renewal,
Okay,
the resolution one. Just wanted to
thank you.
be clear.
That's one thing we hadn't
I
touched.
think we kind of always just assumed it, but I don't know if we ever
Right, we didn't say it
stated
out
it.
loud. Right.
So it's written in the resolution, I just didn't want to catch anyone off guard.
Okay. All right, I will read the resolution. A resolution declaring it necessary to levy an additional tax levy for the purpose of current expenses and requesting the Cuyahoga County Fiscal Office officer to make certain certifications pursuant to Sections 5705.03 and 5705.21 of the revised code. Be it further resolved, this board finds, determines, and declares that, 1, the amount of taxes that may be raised within the 10 mil limitation by levies on the current tax list will be insufficient to provide an adequate amount for the necessary requirements of the school district. 2, it is necessary to levy an additional 6.7 mil ad valorem property tax outside of the 10 mil limitation for the purpose of current expenses. 3, it intends to submit the question of that additional tax levy to the electors of the entire territory of the school district at an election to be held on November 3rd, 2026, as authorized by Sections 5705.03 and 5705.21 of the revised code. And 4, the school district has territory only in the counties of Cuyahoga and Lorraine. It approves that tax will be levied upon the entire territory of the school district for a period of 5 years, commencing in tax year 2026, for first collection in calendar year 2027. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Michelle, seconded by Eric. Any other additional thoughts or questions? Hearing none. George, can you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mr. Helms?
Yes.
And Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Motion passes. All right, our second resolution. A resolution declaring it necessary to raise a certain amount annually for school district purposes and requesting the state commissioner to estimate the respective rates at which it will be necessary to levy, 1, an ad valorem property tax, and 2, a school district income tax on individuals residing in the school district to produce that amount. Be it further resolved, this board declares that it is necessary to raise annually the amount of $18,533,920 for school district purposes, current expenses, and to levy either, 1, an additional ad valorem property tax outside of the 10 mil limitation, or 2, a school district income tax on taxable income as defined in Section 5748.01 E1 of the revised code for that purpose. This board intends to place a related tax levy question before the electors of the school district at the November 3rd, 2026 election. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Michelle, seconded by Eric. George, can you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mr. Helms?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to George for the treasurer's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Hausum. And then before the end of this meeting, we need to figure out a date for a special meeting. So once we receive these certifications back, to have that second stage. As the filing deadline is August 5th, I think our next meeting is August 6th. So I do have one item for Treasury report. It's an annual item. It's establishing the petty cash change funds for fiscal year 27. At the end of each fiscal year, they're turned back in, and we have to reapprove them. They are for, I put the exhibit on the list. It's for my office, $150, superintendent's office, $200. Each of the elementary schools for $100, the preschool for $100. Let's see, for each of the schools, $100 for Cessa Elementary, but as I went down the list, for each of the schools, $100 for petty cash, and they use it in place of emergency. And then also establishing change funds for fiscal year 27 in total of $6,684. $1,084 is for the cafeteria. On the other exhibit, Donna has it broken down by school, how that's broken up. $5,000 for the high school change fund. And these are for the cafeterias for each day to start with money in the registers to give change. And same thing for the high school for athletic events to be able to make change. And the amount is higher because think about it, in the fall, there's multiple events going on between the stadium, Fultz Field, and other events that go on. Middle school athletics, $500. and then the Derby, $100. For a grand total of $7,834. And then I will say too, for the high school, that $5,000 used to be $10,000. We've cut it in half with, not just from this year to last year, it's been cut in half for the past several years, but as things went to more electronic, we were able to cut it in half. So, and that's part of the consent agenda, so that concludes my report.
Any questions for George?
I just have to ask, $84, what do we do with it?
I listened.
So let's see Donna's breakdown. So 700, so it comes from the elementary schools. The total of the elementary schools, $149, $29.80 per elementary school. That's where it comes from.
Which is going to be the follow-up question. Is there a statute or what that governs $29.80?
No, I think it's how they came up with it. There was no,
Extend
what they're
my
used to.
compliments to them.
yeah. Yeah, there's no statute, it's how they requested it.
Works for me.
All right, Dr. Ryba.
Thank you, Ms. Hausum. The first item is to follow up on our last meeting where the board approved continuing with drug testing for this upcoming year. This is to talk about policy implementation. So in the agenda, you could see the current policy language that, the policy is longer than that, but the policy language that determines the scope of drug testing. So middle school and high school students, and then for middle school, that's grades 7 and 8. And then the activities that are covered or drivers that are there. So prior to the meeting, I shared with the board not only this policy statement, but the overall philosophy as to why the drug testing program is in place, because I think that's an important context as we make decisions about process and practices of implementation. And so really, as you break this down, there were some questions for the board to consider under 3 areas. Those areas are draw the line testing, which we've talked about. Draw the line is only done at the high school, and it requires every student that participates in one of these activities or drives a car to be tested once a year. There's random testing, which happens at a frequency that we set monthly. Monthly at the middle school, monthly at the high school, offset of the draw the line test. And the number tested are set by us administratively internally. And then the final decision point is grade levels. Do we include both middle school and high school, just go to high school? So again, for the board to consider today, as you think about the drug testing policy, what are your priorities for implementation in terms of high school draw the line, middle school random, and high school random? And based on the discussion of the board, that will give direction of what we'll implement this upcoming school year.
All right, thank you. Would you guys like to start with the high school annual draw the line testing? Should we start at the top of the list? Sure. Okay. All right. So the annual draw the line testing at high school. If I'm not mistaken, that is every athlete is tested. They're given notice that they will be tested.
We do it fall, winter, and spring. We do it before the athletic seasons. People are given notice as to when the date is. We give them times just because of the number. And although it takes the athletes for that season, it also includes each of the 3 has some drivers, some students that are in clubs, so that it disperses it. Once you do it once, you don't have to do it again. So if you are a volleyball player and then you play girls basketball, you're not testing twice. You just do it once. So the testing in the fall is large, winter and spring is smaller. So again, the concept, if it's a priority for the board to ensure that every high school student is tested at least once, then you would continue with the draw the line.
Are there any thoughts or questions on the draw the line?
And that's been our practice, and I'm good with continuing the practice.
I know I asked this question last time, and you had the number because you had the report pulled up. How many draw the lines did we do?
Oh, I don't have it pulled up today.
I'm sorry, I thought maybe you would remember off the
Oh,
top
gosh,
of your
no, I got all those
All the
other levy
numbers,
numbers in
yeah.
my head now.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay.
It was like in the 1,200 range or something.
that's what I was thinking.
12, 1,300.
Let me see if it's on this. Yeah, I have the breakdown. I mean, we had a total of 1,261 tests this year at the high school, 150 at the middle school, and then I've got somewhere else the breakdown of draw the line. I just have to find it.
Okay.
This is an awkward conversation for some of us because just last meeting, some of us voted no on continuing it entirely, and I was one of those. So I'm just going to put out there what I think I could support and why, and then I will let be what happens. But my suggestion would be to make the program, whether draw the line or random, entirely opt-in. 7 through 12 entirely opt-in, and here's why. We can't test everyone, we know that. It's illegal to do so. We also know that all data shows that kids who are involved in school activities are less likely to be drug users. That is well known. And we've had concerns from parents, community members, that the drug testing of our athletes specifically, or any of our club members, is maybe not hitting the right demographic. So in order to have an opportunity to even hit families who might be struggling, that's not to say there aren't any athletes or any kids in clubs, because there are, right? But it's not going to be your highest percentage, and we don't necessarily want to have them be excluded from those things because there are added benefits. But if we want to have other students involved and support families who may be having a challenge, you give every parent in grades 7 through 12 an opportunity to opt in. So that does two things. One, it helps us reach a different demographic. It gives parents a choice. And it also will give the board a very clear indication of whether or not this is a policy that resonates with our parents. Right now, we don't have a very good sense of whether or not it's resonating with our parents. And we would after this. So that is my suggestion, 7 through 12, completely opt in for next year.
So I have two issues with the drug policy, and I thought putting a pause on it was the solution. But if we're going to go through with it, then I feel like we need to implement it more intentionally to try to solve some of these problems. The first one is that we're not catching the people that we want to catch, and that draw the line and some of this stuff feels more performative than it does in finding things. We hear people talking that there are drug problems. We are not discovering them, and then we find out we're covering or getting more success with the things that we're putting into bathrooms and other measures that we're using to indicate drug usage. So my suggestion would be, it was along with your suggestion, make it opt-in. Cast the net as wide as possible. Let anyone who wanted to participate. But then also protect the parental rights that if someone decides that this is not for their family, then they opt out. That I don't think that it's on the schools to take over the parental rights in this way. And my second problem with this was the way that we've implemented it is similar to an incarceration type experience. And so if we continue with this, I would like it to be in the spirit of how we communicate it, that we're trying to have an early warning system and help those who are at risk. Then I feel like the experience by which we test people needs to be in line with that. And today I would say it is not. From the anecdotals that I hear and from my own family of one, that has not been the experience. And if we could solve both those problems, then I think our drug policy overall would be in a much stronger and healthier way of an early warning detection system, and triaging those families and kids that need help, and being respectful of parental rights and not trying to trample on them.
I've been reflecting on this a lot and thinking about it a lot because obviously I have young kids and I also have an older kid who is off our payroll and out of the house. So, I have two ends of the spectrum. So I've been extremely reflective on this, and I definitely listen and seek to understand and appreciate perspectives from everybody. I agree that at the middle school level, it is up to the parent to parent, to hopefully lead by example. It's their primary responsibility and lies with them, and that's where I think that should stay. But as far as the high school level, I think it should be there for in some way or shape or form. We talk about empowering our learners to build tomorrow's leaders. I think that's somewhat our mantra. I consider myself a leader in life, in work. I feel like experiences, we're all experiencing this right now as being board members and being up here. I think experiences are important for people to grow and learn and develop. And if we're going to build learners or leaders for the future, I feel like some of those experiences are important. And it's a polarizing topic, and I appreciate that. But I feel like at the high school level, if we're raising leaders, then you experience some of those activities as well. So, which is why I lean towards keeping it out of the middle school, letting the parents parent, raise good kids, good citizens, good Strongsville Mustangs. But at the high school level, more towards preparing them for the future and being leaders of the future. That's where my head's at.
Can you just clarify for me? I followed that, but I'm not quite there with how drug testing them helps make them better leaders.
Well, in business, that's what you do.
So it's just as it's in part of an adult job?
Yeah, to me, it's part of the experience of growing up and getting older.
Thank you.
And as far as draw the line versus random, I feel like draw the line's too prescriptive, and random might give you some more context.
So you're suggesting keep it at the high school randomly, maybe not do the draw the lines, and then not at the middle school at all. I could support that for a year and collect data. All the data, expulsions, if the expulsion rates go up, what we're finding. I'd also like to suggest if we're going to just go to the Rams at the high school, the money that we would have spent, that we do earmark that for programs, if possible.
So I think we have consensus for making it opt-in at the middle school, doing randoms at the high school, and acknowledging Eric's remark, we're the ones that are paying for the tests. So we can instruct the drug testing company how we want them to be done and what level of testing we need. And what I mean by level is it does not need to feel like you're in prison. It can be done at a different level. If an individual student has issues or so on, we can deal with them with a little more sensitivity, a little more nuance. And if the drug testing company can't do it that way, then we'll find a different drug testing company.
I have another request. I think we'd have to look into how to do this, but I would also like to expand our data collection. I know it's limited and we might have to get creative. I just don't think that because the variation and why expulsions happen, there could be 15 reasons why. I would, if we can find other ways, other metrics to use, whether that is more surveys, I don't know, I'd have to look into it. But if we're gonna do it a year and collect more data, I want to make sure the data is useful. So that would be my request.
And so that would, I think we just need to put a group effort in that, right? Because we've done a survey. We've looked at the expulsion, so just everybody think about ideas of what would be meaningful for you to see, because we said that at the beginning. It's what you can't measure is people's avoidance of something that they would have potentially tried and didn't because of the policy, other than as survey data. So absolutely, I think we do have to increase and enhance, the data collection piece. And anybody have any ideas? Obviously I'll talk to the folks that are implementing it, as well as the company we use, to see if other districts have tools that they found beneficial, but welcome your thoughts as well.
Well, I would expand it. I would make it random, and I would expand it where every parent in final forms has to say yes or no to drug testing. And let those parents that perhaps aren't part of the experience today allow themselves to be part of the experience.
We've always allowed the opt-ins, but we could, now that we've been up and running for a couple of years, we can expand the communication on that so people know.
All right.
Thank you. Next is an action item. Be it resolved upon my recommendation that the donation agreement between Strongsville City Schools and the Chamber of Commerce be approved as set forth in the exhibit.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Michelle, second by Eric.
So just a special thank you to the Chamber of Commerce, who this is for our turf project. And so they have donated $50,000 for the next 10 years, paid over the next 5 years, to be a part of that project. So thank you to the Chamber, who's been a tremendous supporter of our district and our schools for countless years. And this is the final donation agreement that we have in the hopper right now.
Any questions? George, can you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
I'm going to abstain as a trustee of the Chamber of Commerce.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Motion passes. 4 yeses, 1 abstention.
There's nothing under business services. Under curriculum, this is a recommendation for a 2-year agreement with Ames Web Testing for $35,775 for reading and math benchmark testings pre-K to 8, and it meets the mandates of Senate Bill 19. Going on to student services, we have a number of items for your consideration. The first is that we enter into agreement with PSI Associates for the amount of $91,501.20 for social worker services for the district. As you may know, we have 2 social workers. One is paid for, one is our employee, paid for through the general fund, and another is a contracted employee through PSI. That's for this employee. Second is for tuition for a student to attend school at the Cleveland Clinic Learner School of Autism for a student with disabilities for the upcoming school year. And then we have a number of recommendations for students to attend Trust the Journey Academy, that we enter into agreement with Trust the Journey Academy for the placement of a student with disabilities for 26-27 school year. The annual tuition rate is $85,000 with an additional $5,500 if the student attends extended school year. And the following recommendations are all the same, except they provide for different students. Finally, under number 8 is a recommendation that the board enters into a contract with the Educational Service Center of Northeast Ohio for admission of students with visual, audiology, or hearing impaired services for the upcoming school year. Any questions on student services? Under Human Resources, item 1 is the resignation of a certificated staff member. Item 2 is the resignation of non-certificated staff. Item 3 is the appointments of certificated athletic supplemental contracts. Number 4 is the appointments of non-certificated athletic supplemental contracts. 5 is the appointments of certificated supplemental contracts for additional time. 6 is appointments of certificated supplemental contracts for extended time. And 7 is additional time for our district nurse. Item 8 is recommendations for stipends for our webmasters. Item 9 is change in status for certificated full-time equivalents. 10 is stipends for instructional coaches for the upcoming school year. 11 is changes in status certificated additional days to be paid from our special education fund. 12 is stipend for our resident educator coordination. Under 13, we had correction to the agenda from, I'm trying to look at what the date was. Oh, it's on the April 23rd meeting. They failed to put the PL number in there, so that's the only change, is it's PL 12. It was just the dollar figure before. And number 14 is, in the exhibit, is the game worker rates for school personnel and non-personnel for the upcoming school year. Amounts are paid through payroll and accounts payable from the athletic fund at the high school and the middle school, as well as the OHSA tournament fund. George, I know you work on these. Is there anything of note that you want to mention?
No, Jason prepares them, but there's no changes.
Okay.
These are the same rates from last year. Every year, we just have to approve them, and then I think in the upcoming meeting, he's also going to have the, no, I take it back, it was at the last meeting.
We did last time, yeah.
We had the ticket rates.
Yeah. Nothing under technology, so that concludes my report.
Any questions for Dr. Ryba? All right, we will move on to the adoption of the consent calendar. Action by the Board of Education and adoption of consent calendar at this point of the agenda means that all items appearing in this agenda denoted as type-action consent, which items constitute the consent calendar, are adopted by one single motion unless a member of the board or the superintendent requests that such items be removed from the consent calendar and voted upon separately. Anyone have anything they need to remove? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Michelle, second by Eric. George, can you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mr. Helms?
Yes.
And Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Motion passes. We do have a second reading of board policy, and we did discuss this at our last meeting. This was the revised policy, bring your own technology. If anyone has any questions, please reach out to Michelle, Eric, or Dr. Ryba. And last, we do not have need for executive session tonight, so I will take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Before you do
Oh,
that,
what did I do wrong?
George was
We were
going
going
to
to say the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
We need to come up with a day for the special
Oh.
meeting.
So again, if
I brought my calendar.
If you, we've thrown out in the past July 23rd, July 30th, we have a retreat already. July 30th gives you 3 weeks between today to make the decision. July 23rd obviously gives 2 weeks if we want to stick with the 30s. I'm sorry, we want to stick with the Thursday.
So we could just add it to the agenda for the retreat?
We would have to change the notice and fix it, but yes, we could just make that a part of the retreat agenda.
And will we still meet at 6:30 then?
I think that one starts at 6 maybe.
Was
Let
it
me take a look.
6? I wrote down 6:30.
I thought it was at 6.
Oh, it's not 6:30, I think it's at 6. But I think we usually do 6.
That's my
I
memory.
just have to get coverage for home days. For the duck pond.
I'll take a look on the website.
You have
to see.
someone who can do
George, does that give us enough time to vote, get the information downtown, and get the response?
For July 30th? Yeah. The only thing to think about with the retreat is between the two options, if there's going to be public participation, public comment, discussion, how much will that go into the retreat?
And we have all the cult members here. That, yeah, talking out loud, that could be a lot of conversation again.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. I would almost rather separate them. Is anyone opposed to that?
I'm all for a marathon, but that's just me.
I'm not opposed to it, but it does resonate with me that I'd like to have more time to allow people to give us input if they so desire. So I don't know if the 28th is available. And I don't know if that how that kinks, but it does give us an additional weekend for people to share their thoughts.
I could do the 28th.
I can do the 28th.
Okay. 6:30? Okay, 6:30 on the 28th.
Okay.
And then 6:30 on the 30th?
We're 6:30 on the 30th.
6:30, got it.
And like Rich said, anybody watching at home, if you have a burning desire to talk about either one, the property tax or the income tax, please reach out to us. Okay, now am I allowed to take a adjournment motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Michelle, second by Eric. George, can you take the roll?
Yep. I'm getting there on the agenda. Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mr. Helms?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Meeting adjourned at 8:46.
Everyone have a wonderful evening.